Okay, and then I would go ahead and put the slides up full size. And this is, as you know, how you'll flip them.
Oh, you got the clicky button.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we'll come to that.
Greetings to those in attendance as well as those participating on Teams. Really excited that Professor Belczyk is made her way from Pittsburgh all the way to Vermont for this presentation. Is this the first school you've visited ever? Yeah. See, it shows you this longstanding relationship that VLS has had with JURIST, and I've supervised JURIST students since the inception of our relationship, and I'm absolutely convinced that this is a growth experience in so many respects, and that's what our speakers will be here to talk about. Jaclyn has an excellent presentation to show you what JURIST is and how you can participate. And then Pitta will come and talk about his work with JURIST as a student. I'll close out by briefly discussing how you can get IRP credit for your work at JURIST. It's a volunteer. There's many benefits, but as far as there's no pay, but you can get IRP credit. So I'll close out the presentation by briefly talking about that. And then we'll open up the floor to questions either in person or on Teams as well. So Professor Belczyk, if you will.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here to tell you about JURIST today. So I am from University of Pittsburgh School of Law, where I'm a professor of practice. But that's kind of my side gig because my main job is as the executive editor for JURIST on the web at jurist.org. And I want to tell you all about JURIST today, how you can get involved. So JURIST, we are preparing leaders and preparing lawyers. Okay, so this is what JURIST would look like if you went to see us on the web at jurist.org. Up here, you'd see that we are covering legal news. We are publishing legal commentary. We do features. We are writing about rule of law issues from all around the world. The tagline we've been using on social media for the past year or so is that we are reporting the rule of law in crisis. So if you kind of look around you, what's going on in the world, things that are happening in our own country. The rule of law is under attack in many places in many different ways. And so JURIST is a group of law students who are working to uphold the rule of law by educating people about what is happening around the world. Okay, so what are we? We are an international legal news service powered by law students. There is no other legal news service that is powered by law students. It's a pretty unique experience. You can find us online, as I said, at jurist.org. We are on Twitter, or X, if you will. We are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. We have a YouTube channel. You can find us in all of these places. JURIST is pretty old in terms of internet times, right? Like kind of ancient in terms of the internet. I was just telling Pitta we were established in 1996. He said, oh, that's before I was born, right? So, okay. But yeah, so JURIST has been going strong at this point, getting close to 30 years. It started out as a project of Professor Bernard Hibbets at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. His specialty is actually legal history. And I always thought that was so interesting that a legal historian was interested in documenting the news, right? But I really think it makes a lot of sense because, as a legal historian, he is interested in, documenting things that have happened, things that are happening on an ongoing basis. So the internet was kind of a new thing. He thought, hey, this would be a cool way to share information with the general public, which is not something law schools necessarily have done a lot of. JURIST is based at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, but we are a separate independent organization. And so we have Pitt law students who work with JURIST, but also law students around the world. JURIST is the first and only global collaboration of law students working together in real time. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but there is really no other opportunity to do anything in law school that's going to bring you together, you know, on a Zoom or Teams meeting with law students in, you know, Pittsburgh and India and Kenya and Canada all at the same time, working together on a common goal. So as I said, JURIST reports the rule of law in crisis. And we think that this is an important mission for today's law students. One of our things that we've long said on JURIST is that we're not your great-grandfather's law review. We are not sort of publishing an analysis of some, you know, esoteric concept that's going to get published in a book that's then going to go sit on a library shelf. This is dynamic. This is stuff that's current, and this is stuff that people are reading. You know, people are going to see your work on JURIST. We're reporting law that matters when it matters. Here's a snapshot of, you know, one of the hardest stories I had to write on JURIST, right, with the Supreme Court decision in 2022 overturning Roe v. Wade. JURIST is where things are happening. So we were in Myanmar when the military overthrew the government in a coup in 2021. We had actual law students in Myanmar filing dispatches for us, you know, what was happening, what was going on. You know, they were literally like hiding in a basement, you know, filing for us on JURIST. JURIST was in Kabul when Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. We had law students in Afghanistan writing for us on JURIST. Many of those brave people have gotten out. We even have one who is now at Pitt Law this year doing her LLM degree, you know, sort of based on this connection and relationship with JURIST. JURIST was in Ukraine when Russia invaded. We have law students reporting for us from Ukraine, and now many of them are out of the country filing reports for us. JURIST was at the White House when President Zelensky visited last year. Actually, about a year ago, we received our first ever White House press credentials. So one of our recent graduates is now credentialed at the White House. We're hoping to add more students to that. One of our Pitt Law students is going to be doing a semester in DC this spring and will be getting White House press credentials. JURIST was in Ohio earlier this month. I guess that's last month now, for the state constitutional ballot. One of our law students who is an Ohio native was writing for us about that. JURIST is powered at this point by more than 100 law students from 50 different law schools, both in the US and abroad. So we started out at the University of Pittsburgh, but have expanded a lot, particularly in recent years. Led by Pitt Law professors, so that's me, and that's Professor Bernard Hibbets, who founded JURIST and is our publisher and editor-in-chief. We're supported by professional journalists. Every year we have a JURIST journalist in residence who provides advice to us, acts as a sounding board, speaks with our students, answers questions. This is Steve Herman, who is the chief US correspondent for The Voice of America. He was our JURIST journalist in residence last year. He was one of the journalists who got kicked off of Twitter last December for tweeting about Elon Jet. If you recall, a handful of major journalists were banned from Twitter. You know, he got to come and talk to our students about that. He advised JURIST on how we should be proceeding with, you know, are we still going to be on Twitter? How do we sort of navigate this uncertainty that's going on? This is John Decker. He is a White House correspondent for Gray News, which is a consortium of local news television stations. He's actually the only lawyer on the White House press corps. So we are excited to start working with him this year. He's just sort of taken over as our JURIST journalist in residence, and we'll be speaking with our students. And we're, looking forward to that. So in the US, JURIST law students are volunteering from Pitt Law, which is our home base, from Vermont Law and Graduate School. This was actually our sort of first time we expanded beyond Pitt Law. You know, could we do this? Could we bring in law students who are not at Pitt? We went first to Vermont. Only about 4 years ago, we were saying it seems like forever we've been doing this. But Vermont was the first time that we brought in student staff members from outside of Pitt Law, with, of course, Professor Johnson's help and support with that. And we've really grown from there. I was saying it was just in 2019. And so because we were having students who were starting to work for JURIST remotely, I was making, recorded training videos and, things that could be done online. It was perfect timing because if you'll recall, in March of 2020, all of a sudden everything was online. And, when I was used to training our Pitt Law staff in person in a classroom, we were doing that online. So it was just really worked out for everybody. At this point, we've got law students at Harvard, Stanford, Boston University, Fordham. Another place where we have a relationship a little bit like here is at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where we have a relationship with their dean who had previously been on JURIST's board of directors. So we've successfully had a group of students from UNLV for the past several years. More US law schools coming this year. We've actually just been interviewing folks from New England School of Law, from Southwestern in Los Angeles. So we're trying to get people from a range of geographical locations across the US, especially as we ramp up to 2024. We're anticipating, maybe some rule of law issues, arising and becoming important to have students who are based in various places to be able to report on these things for us. Around the world, we have law students, staff, and correspondents in more than 20 countries, in no particular order. We have highlighted here a few of the conflict zones that I mentioned earlier, but we're really spread out in all kinds of places. Most recently, we added staff in mainland China and Hong Kong, which has been really exciting to be able to give them a place to share their voices and talk about legal issues in their country. JURIST is a really diverse organization. Women make up about 70% of our student staff, also the majority of our professional staff, besides Professor Bernard Hibbets. Over 60% of our staff in the US, worldwide, are persons of color. We have many LGBTQ staffers, both in the US and around the world. We publish original legal news and informed commentary 7 days a week, 365 days a year, increasingly 24 hours a day, because we have staff around the world. There are writers working on news stories. There are editors publishing content, in China, in Australia, India, Africa, US, all the way around the clock. All of our news stories are based on primary sources. So we're not just looking at another news article, an AP report or a Reuters article, and kind of summing it up and reposting it on JURIST. If we're writing about an important court decision that's come down, then we are looking at that court decision as the primary source and doing original reporting on that. Our law student correspondents abroad are reporting on what's happening in their locations. So we have our news service staffed by news writers. We also have correspondents who are filing dispatches. This is what a lot of our reports from Myanmar, Ukraine, Afghanistan have looked like, kind of an on-the-ground report that's both news and a bit of personal analysis, including a bit more of their voice. We have social media content. We're trying to share all of this amazing stuff with our readers. Multimedia content. We've been getting into YouTube. We keep kind of talking about podcasts. And I think if we have some students who are interested in running with that, podcast could be amazing. And as I said, all this work is taking place continuously across time zones. JURIST content is read by more than 1 million people a year worldwide. We get cited in law reviews. We've been cited in law school casebooks, testimony before congressional committees, in judicial opinions, briefs to federal appellate courts, including briefs to the US Supreme Court. You've not yet been cited in a Supreme Court opinion, but maybe one of these days. JURIST staffers have been profiled and interviewed on major media platforms in the US, Canada, and Asia. So here's a still of one of our Ukrainian law students talking to CNN. You know, we had people on the ground in Ukraine at the beginning. CNN didn't. CNN came to us, you know, asking if we could put them in touch with somebody who could talk about what was going on in Ukraine. So, oh, here's a slide I should have edited. At Vermont law at this time, we are primarily looking for reporters, so people who would be interested in writing about US and international legal news stories based on primary source documents. Correspondents who would be covering local, state, national legal developments. Social media editors, so people who are interested in producing daily content for Instagram, Facebook, maybe Threads we've been playing around with a little bit, you know, not quite sure where things are going, and X. Multimedia producers, anyone with video or podcasting experience. So why should you consider getting involved? So as part of JURIST staff, you're going to learn about the latest US and international legal events as they happen. A lot of law students tell me, oh, you know, I'm in law school, I haven't read the news in 6 months, I haven't even looked up from my case books. You're going to be aware of what's going on as it's happening. You're performing a pro bono public service by explaining these events to others, right? So you may think of pro bono in a sort of limited sense as providing direct legal services, but pro bono really means for the public good. And that's really what JURIST is trying to do, is provide this information to the public for the benefit of the public. Get your own byline. And that way you're building up an online writing portfolio for potential future employers. You can put a link right to all of the stories you've written right on your resume as instant writing sample. That's going to be something different from the memo or appellate brief that many of your colleagues may be using as a writing sample. You get to work with diverse colleagues from different places, cultures, continents. You're literally going to be having conversations on Slack or jumping onto a Zoom meeting with people all over the world. You get to work with experts and newsmakers who are actually making change in the world. And you're publicly standing up for the rule of law, working with inspiring law students around the world. These things will prepare you to be leaders. You're also going to learn a lot of important lawyering skills, right? You're going to learn how to write clearly and concisely for legal and lay audiences. Learn how to edit quickly and carefully. Learning how to research and find primary legal sources easily and efficiently. Law firms are going to love that if you're not racking up Westlaw and Lexis bills, right? Because you know where to find things easily out on the internet. Learn how to evaluate evidence for information, credibility, how to pay attention to detail, how to work under real-world time pressure, and how to collaborate with others as members of a virtual team. These things prepare you to be lawyers. So a lot of people say that all sounds great. What does this actually mean for me? For new staff, we're looking for a commitment of about 5 hours per week. News writers are typically working on a schedule. You would have two 2-hour scheduled shifts every week, which we organize, you know, to obviously fit with your class, work, other obligations. So that's 4 hours, plus we want you to read JURIST, keep up with things that are going on. So we say 5 hours a week. You should be someone who's interested in current events, somebody with a strong work ethic, consistent discipline and commitment, good time management skills. You know, as law students, you are busy people, right? So if you're taking on another obligation, then I know you think about that carefully and whether you're going to have the time for it. Team spirit and the ability to work well with others and a desire to change the world. So if all this sounds good to you, you're thinking about applying, the application process is fairly simple. We ask for a short personal statement of interest. We ask you to create a brief sample news story in JURIST style. And my advice on that is always to go read some jurist news stories, right? And then you kind of start to get a sense of this is what a jurist news article looks like. And then you can choose any, current event with a legal angle and write a jurist style news article. You're going to upload your resume, your CV, and then we'll do a Zoom interview, just usually with me, sometimes with Professor Hibbets, and sometimes even with one of our student editors. You don't have to have any journalism experience. A lot of times we attract people to jurists who have journalism experience, kind of for obvious reasons. But if you have never, so much as written for your high school newspaper, that's okay. We'll train you. You get feedback as you progress. So we have jurist information sheets that you can pick up. I'm obviously here today to answer questions, but also make sure you have my contact info is on the information sheet so you can reach out to me. And if you want to take the next step, it's jurist.org/apply, and you'll click the link there and fill out the application. We are taking applications for Vermont 2Ls through next Friday, September 22nd. Applications will open up for Vermont 1Ls in the spring semester. All right, let me just show you around Jurist real briefly and kind of point out some of what we do. Yeah, is this an internet?
Yeah.
I haven't been to Jurist yet today, so I didn't know what would be at the top of the front page when I went there, but we have a feature. We've been doing a series of interviews with some of our students and other people who have, been dealing with the ongoing effects of the coup in Myanmar. So this looks like we have the next in our series of Myanmar coup interview up here. This is part of our features service. And I know Pitta will tell you a little bit about his experience working with features in a few minutes. On features, we do longer form journalism. Our news articles, you'll notice, are all pretty short, but sometimes we really want to get into a complicated topic. So there may be a long read on features. We recently put together an explainer on all of the indictments, Trump legal cases, right? More for us than anything else, right? To help us keep track of which case and exactly what's going on. But I mean, obviously for the public as well. And then we've also been doing a lot of interviews with various people in our features service. Our news service, serious law, primary sources, global perspective. We cover such a wide variety of things. At the top of this, I see something from Northern Ireland, and there I see Trump's face at the top of the page. And you can see we have students working around the world. So Amy is our UK bureau chief, has written this article about Northern Ireland. Lauren is our news managing editor. She's a 3L at Pitt Law, who's been with Jurist since she started as a 1L and has risen up to become one of the leaders on our news service. Dispatches, these are reports from our correspondents around the world. We've got something in here from the EU. We just had one of our Kenyan staffers attending Africa's climate summit last week, reporting for us on that. Something from Kazakhstan, Pakistan, all kinds of interesting things on our dispatch service. Features I mentioned. We've got a page that focuses all about the rule of law, kind of explaining what this concept means. So yeah, I would encourage you to go to jurist.org, poke around, follow us on the social medias if you're so inclined. But now I'm going to turn it over to Pitta to tell you a bit about his experience with Jurist. Come on up.
Thank you so much, Jackie, and you can already see the eyes here beaming with excitement, ready to sign up. So I'll talk about the reason, why I joined JURIST, the work that I do with JURIST. So the reason why I joined JURIST, initially it was during my first year of law school, so that I could have an opportunity to get some legal writing experience on various, legal and human rights development issues across the world. And JURIST offers, law students, as Jackie had mentioned, not only across America, but across the world, the opportunity to get such experiences in a variety of different ways. So through news stories, feature-length pieces, dispatches, and commentaries. And so my initial involvement with JURIST began when I started writing news stories. These news stories were meant to be less than 500 words and were about relevant, legal and human rights development issues that were unfolding in the world during that week. So these news stories were meant to be written in a neutral tone, and every news story had to contain a primary and secondary source. And writing news stories, it improved my legal writing in that it strengthened my ability to be concise, to be cautious about tone, using words which are neutral in tone versus politically charged. And to excel at this, it's an ongoing journey. Sometimes you want to state a key fact in an article, which is completely accurate, but if the wording comes off as politically charged, it's a problem. And our news stories, they're meant to be an active voice and not a passive voice. It kind of teaches you to do that, and we do that a lot in legal writing, where there's an emphasis on the active voice and not the passive voice. So this kind of really sharpens your skill. And the people who are editing your news stories are fellow law students. So it's really, like law students teaching other law students how to improve their writing. And, it's a beautiful thing. So in terms of how I went about choosing topics to write about for my news stories, senior student editors in JURIST would post on a daily basis legal news event headlines on a website called Trello, which you guys will know about when you join JURIST. It's for writers to work on, and the writers would then select the news event they want to write about. They'd find a primary source, which the event is based on, extract key information from that primary source, and find secondary sources, and then try to write a news story that meets the guidelines that I talked about. And JURIST also lets writers pitch their own news stories to write about. So for instance, I pitched to JURIST and then wrote about one legal news story, which I got because of my connections with the human rights and anti-war community in Canada. The former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, was planning a visit to Toronto. And I was aware that a couple of Canadian NGOs had filed a court application known as a mandamus in federal court, urging the Canadian government to deny the entry of the former Israeli Prime Minister into Canada on the basis that he committed war crimes in violation of both Canadian and international law. So I pitched this story to JURIST, and they told me I could write about it. So the first thing I did was try to get a hold of that court application, the mandamus, which is the primary source, and I couldn't find it anywhere online. So I decided to call up the law office in Ottawa, which had filed the mandamus in federal court. I told them, I'm a law student, writer from JURIST, and I want to write this article to bring exposure to your legal initiative. And I asked if they could send me a copy of the mandamus, and they sent it over in a matter of minutes. I then asked for the lawyer who submitted the mandamus whether he would be willing to provide JURIST a comment, which we can put in the article. And nobody told me to do that, but I remember as a kid reading news articles, like the New York Times, and we there's would say something like XYZ in a comment to the New York Times said such and such, and I thought that was like a really cool thing that journalists did. So I decided to do the same thing. And I feel that when you have authority figures comment on a topic that you're writing about, it really strengthens the credibility of your piece. And the lawyer provided me a very good comment, which was then published in the article. Subsequently, the JURIST news story was shared and circulated throughout the numerous NGOs in Canada that were working to prevent the former Israeli Prime Minister from entering the country. And aside from news stories, I could talk about other news stories, but aside from that, JURIST also publishes what are called dispatches, and it's really cool. It's where law students who are on the ground in various parts of the world. They can write about like legal and human rights developments that are, unfolding in the place that they're living in. So this past summer, I was in Portland, Maine, participating in a solidarity march as part of the Milk with Dignity campaign, which sought to bring attention to the horrendous labor and housing conditions on dairy farms, specifically those in Maine that supply milk to the Hannaford supermarket chain. And while being on the ground, taking part in the protests in front of the headquarters at Hannaford, I really got to hear a lot of stories about the mistreatment that migrant workers are subjected to. I thought to myself, I'm a writer on JURIST. Maybe I should use this voice that I have to amplify the Milk with Dignity campaign and get the word out about the mistreatment of migrant workers, which Hannaford is complicit in. And during my time at the march, I managed to take photos, and I managed to get a copy of written testimonies of the abuse migrant workers are subjected to. So I decided to write a dispatch story the night I returned from the march. And so I did that story, and it was published. And I have to give a shout out to the immigration clinic at this law school, specifically Jill Martin Diaz, because for making that trip possible. She teaches the immigration law course. For any of you guys who will be too well, want to take that course. So I was a student clinician at the immigration clinic during the time that I took part in the march. And what I found out, doing these kind of stories is I really like talking to people, approaching them, asking their thoughts about various legal and human rights issues. And I was aware that JURIST has a specific section called the feature section, where they publish interviews exclusively, done by law students for the most part on various pressing legal and human rights issues around the world. So there was one topic that interested me. I was very closely following news about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and I wanted to do an interview with a distinguished academic to try and bring attention to the worsening situation there. So one late Friday night, it must have been like 11 or 12, I decided to email Columbian economics professor Jeffrey Sachs, who has written extensively on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I wrote him an email kind of as a writing exercise, because clearly I don't have a life. So that's the one thing you can extract from this. So I wrote him an email saying that I'm a law student writer with JURIST, a legal news publication. Can I interview you? And believe it or not, he responded to me. This is like late Friday night. He responded to me within 20 minutes, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, send the questions over." So so quickly, and then it was published, and it was well received, and it was circulated across social media. And quickly thereafter, I began interviewing more people about different topics. I then did an interview with a law professor, Marjorie Cohn, who was an outspoken advocate for the release of Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, who's currently imprisoned in the United Kingdom, awaiting extradition to the United States on espionage charges. Marjorie Cohn had argued that the United States, their persecution of Julian Assange is a violation of his First Amendment and freedom of press. So that interview was published and circulated, hundreds of times on Twitter, now X, and it was very well received. And my most recent interview I did was with the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, and she's a friend of mine. And she recently published a report presented to the United Nations discussing the worsening conditions in the Palestinian territories as a result of Israel's brutal and ongoing occupation. So that interview was also very well done and received. And the technique of interviewing people, it's a form of writing in a way, because as an interviewer, you're writing and structuring questions in either an open-ended or closed-ended manner, and based on the kind of response you want to get from the interviewee. So I find that it's a really good skill to be a feature writer, and I do documentary filmmaking as a hobby. So I've interviewed dozens of people, and I feel it's a really good skill to strengthen. And if you notice, the people that I've interviewed and some of the subject matters I covered, like the Russian and Ukraine conflict, Julian Assange, Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. I mean, these are some of the most controversial issues in the international arena. And the fact that JURIST has provided a platform to allow some of the most marginalized voices to freely speak about pressing legal and human rights issues, I find that to be extremely valuable. which I think all law students should take advantage of. To have such a platform is very unique. There is none quite like it, and there's a great sense of community that I feel working with JURIST. We're all law students from various parts of the globe: the United States, the UK, India, Australia, Uganda, China. We even have, as Jack had mentioned, Ukrainian law students as well, writers with JURIST. So there's a great sense of global solidarity, and we're all learning from each other and hoping to become better writers. So I would encourage everybody to join. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm ready to sign up. That sounds awesome.
We have some questions online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so one of them I can answer is from Marisol, and is, will you email the information sheet? And I can do that after this. And then the other one for Jaclyn is, are you taking applications from 3Ls?
Yes.
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 You said 2 Ls, but 3 Ls can't apply.
Yes.
Be so forward as to say.
Yes. We like 2 Ls because you've got 2 more years for us to keep you. But yes, 3 Ls are also welcome to apply, or non-traditional students as well. I just interviewed somebody who's just like, I'm in my 1 3/4 L because I'm in my 2nd year of a part-time program. That's all great.
Great. This is my 2nd semester of my 1L year because I started in the summer.
Okay.
So would I need to wait until spring, or is that something that you'd be willing to?
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. What do you think?
About it? Okay.
That's a hybrid position, just as you said, non-traditional.
Mhm.
I'm prepared to say we don't want 1Ls to apply in their fall semester because all the focus has to be on law school. But you've already been through that. And now you're in your 2nd semester. You're effectively in, you're in the 2nd semester of law school. And that's when we allow 1Ls to apply. So I guess you just have to take a real serious look at your own commitments and your own confidence level, but you would have permission to apply. And I know you're a good writer, so jurors could benefit from your skills.
Sounds really amazing. So
How inspiring, really. Pitta's talk and Jaclyn's presentation. I just get excited all over again about this project. I can say that to just affirm points that were made. I really like this emphasis, and Pitta, both of you did really, this emphasis on primary authority. And so what I've heard from the students I supervise, we talk a lot about the benefits to your writing, which is absolutely true, but your researching skills improve as well. You've got to find these documents. How about this, the mandamus in Canada? They're working hard to find these. You can't write the article without the original research. And so in addition to all the obvious benefits to your writing, your research skills improve as well. Just really a great organization. I'm happy that our school's a part of it. And every summer there's an award ceremony. And I can honestly say that it's held on Zoom. I've never been in a meeting that has a more diverse audience across, and I'm saying all meetings, anywhere, at any time, that has a more diverse, participation than that meeting each June. It's really quite remarkable. Okay, so I'm just here briefly to say that I will supervise any jurist student who's interested in earning 1 credit of IRP each semester. And in truth, it works just like any other IRP does, which is that we meet monthly. You submit your articles, we talk about them. I offer my own editing advice, basically. And that's how the semester progresses. And I've done it pretty much every semester since we've begun this association. And it's always worked out very well for the student. And you can do repeats as well, especially when you move into new ventures, like be it dispatches or features, or I don't know if you have any interesting commentaries as well.
Yeah, I'm due to do a commentary. I didn't speak about it because I haven't really done one yet. But
So it's justified that you can get credits in more than 1 semester, and the justification is you are progressing through these new experiences that JURIST has to offer. So that's my little pitch. Let's turn it back to Q&A. Does anyone in the room or online have questions? And in addition to circulating the information sheet, which those in attendance can pick up in hard copy, Claire will also post for those online or any of your friends. Claire will post the recording. We'll send the recording to our web request line. And we're going to put a high pressure on them to get it posted to VLS Live real soon, ideally today or Monday. Sonny, did you have a question?
Yeah, just in terms of the brief sample news story, should it be about the same length as something we see on JURIST?
Yeah, so JURIST news stories, as Pitta said, are typically under 500 words. They average around the 300 word mark, so you don't have to write, you know, a dissertation. And I find sometimes like keeping it simple and shorter like might serve you better in this type of a circumstance.
And again, there's a little bit of a time crunch in the sense that it's due by next Friday. So.
And that's so we can get you like started with JURIST
Yeah.
before all of a sudden you're like, it's exam time and
Yeah.
I've lost my mind. So.
And as well on the IRP, I'll just add that we won't begin that opportunity till the spring because we're already well on our way into the semester and I've got my own set of IRPs already scheduled. So the IRP opportunity begins in the spring, even if you happen to start writing for JURIST in the fall. Rachel, do you have your hand?
Just kind of clarify, it's a semester-long basis, and then you don't have to reapply from semester to semester if you want to stay on. It's just like how you're progressing.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to reapply at any point.
Yeah, I'm focusing the IRP on a given semester, but no, once you are on JURIST.
Yeah, you're in.
We
don't want to let you go. We continue, you know, during the summer and during breaks and just always doing stuff on JURIST.
Yeah, and that's, again, another thing I can report is Pitta spoke eloquently about the mentoring and editing you get from your fellow classmates. Well, the JURIST staff is there too. What I've heard from VLS students is they feel very well taken care of. This is a system now that's in place for, as Jackie says, almost 30 years. You're stepping into a well-oiled system, and so it's there to you know, help you improve through their vast experience. And that's the word that students tell me is that from sort of like from day one, you're part of the team and folded in and given editing advice and so forth. Rachel?
What was I going to ask? Actually, I don't think I remember. I will think of it in a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Pitta explained how, to me helpfully, how the selection process goes. You can pitch an idea, or you just come. What is it like at noon every day? I seem to recall. Is maybe that's changed.
I mean, it's ongoing,
Yeah.
right? So Pitta mentioned Trello, which is basically a virtual bulletin board, and that's what we use with our virtual team to track all of the news stories that we are covering on JURIST, or we think we should cover on JURIST, or a student has suggested, or whatever it is. We make cards on the bulletin board that can be moved around to, here's a story suggestion. This has been approved by an editor. I'm working on writing this. Now I'm done writing and an editor is working on it. Now it's been published. So that just kind of gives us all an easy at a glance to who's doing what at any given moment.
And that's, you know, the separate subject of resume material. In my humble opinion, having seen enough academic resumes that look this way, I would post every single last article you write, one after another. Get them all in there. Really impress them.
I remember what I was going to ask. So I'm guessing since this is a globally run organization, like even if you do a semester abroad or a semester in practice, if you're anywhere, you can still stay on with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, sometimes we have people who are going somewhere, you know, I'm not even sure I'm going to have internet access. So, you know, I don't know if it's going to work out. Or you might not be able to keep up with doing 2 shifts every week on the news service if you're, you know, taking on another full-time internship. So, you know, maybe you take a little bit of a step back, maybe you take a break, maybe you shift to working on something else, just like filing a monthly dispatch from your experience rather than contributing twice a week to news service. So there's a lot of flexibility. You know, we try to structure it because it's a lot of students and we're trying to keep everything organized, but there's also a lot of flexibility for individual circumstances. It's also nice that we have staff around the world because everyone's law schools are on different timelines. So like, well, it's your exam time, it's not India's exam time, and vice versa, so that we, people can take, like, hey, I need 2 weeks off to like study and take my exams. That's fine. You're in law school, we get it.
I just don't believe there's another law student organization with such a global presence. I could be wrong about that, but.
Yeah, Professor Hibbets always says that maybe some of the international moots are the closest thing, but still that's a adversarial, competitive
Exactly.
process. It's not people working on one project together.
Yeah, that's true. There's certain competitions that do attract teams from other countries, but even so, that's sort of a one-off,
Yeah.
It happens once a year. Okay, well, is that inspiration enough? Rush on over to your computer and apply.
Apply today.
Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you all. Your state is lovely. I've never been here before.
As we close.
All right.
The application itself is a link, is that other link, right? Not directly to you. But
Right. So it's jurist.org/apply. And from there, it's like, click here. And it's just a Google form.